Okay, my friends, it's good to see you all.
Yeah,
We
trust God.
find ourselves on Dalid Amud Beis. That's 4B. Okay? And previously on our Gemara here, we learned a few important concepts. We learned about something called Dofen Akuma and Lavud. Basically, we're learning about all these different kinds of tricks, not really tricks, but halacha Moshe Sinai, these traditions that we have to make sukkah construction a little bit easier. We talk about Dofen Akuma, which is when a wall is within 4 amos. We could view it as coming closer and bending in. Then we talked about Lavud. Lavud is a very important concept that comes up all throughout Shas, which is if something's within 3 tefachim, it's considered to be adjacent to each other for halachic purposes. And now, tonight, we're going to introduce ourselves to a new concept called Good Asik. I like to joke, the Christians have Good Friday, we get Good Asik. All right, so we get something else in. You'll see what I mean. Here we go. We are on the top of 4B. I would imagine it's still the first page in Art Scroll. And Haisa Gavame Esrim Ama. If a sukkah is above 20 amos. So it's about 6 lines down in the actual text of the Gemara. Okay, here we go. Haisa Gavame Esrim Ama. If a sukkah is 20 amos tall. Okay, so remember, our goal is whenever a sukkah is above 20 amos tall, we're trying to find ways to make it kosher. So, asara tfachim, and you build an amud, you build this platform that is 10 tfachim tall. The yeshbo hakshir sukkah. Now, this is different. In the previous year, last week, when we talk about itztaba, we're talking about a lower surface that's below 10 tfachim. Let's say 10 tefachim is maybe slightly shorter than the height of the mechitza that we have in the chapel, just to give you an idea roughly of what 10 tefachim is. So 40 inches. So if you have an amud, you have some platform that is 10 tefachim tall. Anyone remember why 10 tefachim is an important number? 10 tefachim. I know Toby knows the answer, but you're muted. But I trust that Toby's trying to tell us is that 10 tefachim is the minimum height of a wall in halacha. Very good. I know that's what you were saying.
You could see read my lips.
So the thing is, it's actually interesting in Hilchos Shabbos. If you have an area that is small, that's 10 tefachim tall, you can have something that's called a makom pater, which you're actually allowed to transfer things between a public domain to a private domain via a makom pater. So this comes up in Shabbos as well, and we'll leave that discussion for another time. So, stavar abai lemeimar, that if you have this surface that's 7 by 7 tefachim length and width, and is 10 tefachim tall, good asik mechitzta, we view as if the walls of this platform actually shoot up all the way to the ceiling, thereby enclosing anyone who's on there and making your own little private sukkah inside the non-kosher sukkah. Amar le Rava says, probably what many of us are thinking, what kind of ridiculous maneuver is this? We need machitzas that you can actually see with your eyes, right? We can't play a trick like that. We don't have any. So just to help you visualize this, let's see where the picture is. Yeah, the picture. I like to bring the picture book when I can. All right, so I don't know if this is going to work. If I put it up to the camera, you'll see over here. Will my finger see it?
Yes.
Okay, so you can see there's that little stage over there, and then basically we view as if the walls are shooting out from that little platform all the way up to the ceiling, and that way that little area over there becomes its own kosher sukkah. Okay, Rava says again, it's true. I buy that there is a concept called good asik. He seems to agree that good asik exists, but it's not going to work in the case of a sukkah where you need actual recognizable walls. And the issue over here is that since there's a platform that you're standing on top of, this looks like the base of a platform. It doesn't look like individual walls. If you hollowed out the platform, it would be a different story. That makes sense? Okay. Let me just take any questions at this point, because most of the rest of the Gemara we're going to be doing tonight is built upon understanding this. So I want to make sure this is clear. Again, there is a concept called good asik, which means that if you have a wall that is 10 tefachim tall, the minimum shear of a wall, for all intents and purposes, it keeps shooting up higher and higher. There is an invisible, imaginary, legal boundary. Think about airspace. It shoots through the airspace and creates halachic walls. So that's the joke they always say when they open up Masechet Sukkah, and the guy builds a sukkah. It's like, I don't get how all these pigeons and cats got into my sukkah. What do you mean? There's good asik. The walls shoot all the way up. How'd they get through? So, all right. So that's the joke they always say. Okay. Good. Going forward. Turn Rabbanan. Another maneuver. This one is even more controversial. Not arba kundisin. Let's say you're on the roof. You take 4 poles and you put the pole in each corner of the roof, and then and you put skach on top of it. We got the visual on it. Good. Rav Yaakov Mashir b'Chachamim posted. Rav Yaakov says that's okay, and the Chachamim say that's not a reasonable arrangement. And the Chachamim will elaborate on why later on, but it's pretty intuitive from the beginning. The reason it's problematic is because, well, you have 4 poles. Imagine like a chuppah. All right. Imagine you have a chuppah. So the chuppah has 4 poles, but where's all the walls? However, Rav Yaakov, we're going to have to understand why. We'll talk about later. These 4 poles might work in lieu of proper walls. We'll talk about that later, but just accept it for the time being. Now, here's the thing. We've been doing this a lot, actually. For some reason, I think here, like more so than others, I feel like in previous weeks, we've been having a lot of meta machlokus. A machlokus about the scope of a machlokus. We did that all the way at the beginning of the Masechet. Oh, we're still technically the beginning of Masechet, but you know what I mean. So remember, we had that whole machlokus about how to understand the machlokus for Yehuda and the Chachamim, about their machlokus, about when 20 amos might be for a sukkah. So we're going to do that right now. What is the scope of Rav Yaakov and the Chachamim's machlokus? Rav Huna machlokus al sfas agag. Rav Yaakov savar amir good asik mechitzta. Rabbanan savar lo amir good asik mechitzta. So this is like the machlokus of Ayin Rava that we had. That this is poles on the side of it, on the corners of the building. So Rav Yaakov says, well, since these poles are lined up with a building is generally more than 10 tefachim tall, right? So we imagine that the walls of the building actually are shooting up above the roof and are enclosing the area where the skach is covering on top of those poles. To which the Chachamim would respond the same thing Rava said, that I don't see any walls. If I can't see any walls, then there are no walls over here. And Rav Huna says, however, even Rav Yaakov would concede that if you put the poles not on the side of the building where it aligns with the walls, but you just put it in middle of the roof, then certainly that's not, you're not going to have any good asik there because the walls are all the way yonder. Do you want a picture to illustrate it? Would that be helpful? Yeah? Okay, here's a picture. Need to figure out okay. There we go. See the bottom, the 2 from the top, the 2 that are from, you see it? I can't hold this up. And that one. So according to Rav Huna, there's a machlokus, and the one where the poles are actually corners of the building. But he says if you only put the poles up in the middle of the building, even Rav Yaakov would say that's not kosher, because then you can't even imagine that the walls over here are shooting up through good asik. They're just 4 poles. You see the difference?
Yes.
Okay, very good. You know, by the way, there are separate, they make a separate picture book just for Sukkah, Masechet Sukkah. So if any of you ever, I'm saying, on your own, or if there's enough interest, I don't know, we can even do a book order, want the picture book for yourself, It might be easier than squinting every time I put it up at the camera. Maybe that's something after Pesach we can make an arrangement for. Okay, going forward. So that's one way to understand a machlokes, that of course if the poles are in the middle of the roof, it's not going to be kosher. But maybe if they're on the side and they align with the wall, then it's machlokes of Yaakov Nachachavim if we say good asik mechitzta. However, Rav Nachman Amar be'emtza gag machlokes. He says the debate even extends to the middle of, even if the poles are put in the middle of the roof. How would that work? We're going to talk about it later, but he has this belief that if you have 4 poles, they can suffice in lieu of a wall. Now, here's the thing. He says that there's a machlokis Rav Yaakov and the Chachamim when the poles are be'emtza hagag, in middle of the roof. But he bailahu be'emtza hagag machlokis alosatzi gad divrei kol shera odilma be'mizo machlokis. However, it's unclear from Rav Nachman's statement whether he means that they only argue in middle of the roof, but even the Chachamim would concede that if you put the poles on the side aligned with the wall, be kosher, or if he thinks it's just a machlokis across the board. That's not clear. The Gemara says, Teku, we'll have to wait till Eliyahu Navi comes to resolve that for us. But in the meantime, the Gemara is going to raise a double-pronged question against Rav Huna's understanding of the machlokes, and it's going to ultimately, spoiler alert, he's going to have to amend his conception. So the question is coming from a brisa, not dalid kundisin ba'aretz usichech al gab. So if you stick 4 poles not on a roof, but just in middle of a field, you decide to stick, imagine like 4 chuppah poles, or a little thicker, a little thicker than chuppah poles actually, into the ground, and then you put skach on top of it. Rav Yaakov Makshir v'Chachamim Poslin. Rav Yaakov says it's kosher. Chachamim say it's puzzle. Now I have a question, guys. If you were to stick 4 poles randomly in middle of the field, or imagine you go to a Good Shalom parking lot, you take 4 poles and you stick it into the, sorry, not to re-traumatize you, Toby. You take 4 poles and you stick them into the ground and you put skach on top of it. So the question would be, so here's the question. Is that more analogous to a case of putting 4 poles on the side aligned with the wall or in middle of the roof? What would you say that's closer to?
The middle of the roof. Very
good, Toby, because there's no adjacent wall to align with it. So that's what the Gemara says. Eretz is precisely what the Gemara says. That if you were to stick 4 poles in middle of the ground, middle of the parking lot, that's akin to sticking 4 poles in middle of the roof, which is not aligned with a wall. So, and even still, the Brisa tells us the Kamachshir Rabbi Yaakov. Rabbi Yaakov says, even in that case, it would be kosher. So, Tiyufta de Rav Huna Tiyufta. This would seem to contradict Rav Huna's understanding of Rav Yaakov, because Rav Huna would say even Rav Yaakov would concede if you just put 4 poles in the middle of a wall, it's not going to be kosher. Well, it seems Rav Yaakov argues 4 poles anywhere is going to be kosher for a sukkah. Va'od, and furthermore, the etzahu depligi. Since their machlokis is exclusively when you randomly put 4 poles in the middle of the roof, that would imply we can infer that there's no machlokis when it comes to when you put the poles aligned with the wall. That even the Chachamim would concede that's kosher, which again, now that's also contradicts Rav Huna's assumption, because Rav Huna assumes that there's no machlokis when you put it in the middle, and he assumes that there's only a machlokis when it's on the side, aligned with the wall. But here we see even the Chachamim would say when the poles are aligned with the wall, it would be kosher. So this seems to align very nicely with Rav Nachman, not with Rav Huna. Got the question? Okay, it's a little bit of a cheshbon. Amar lech Rav Huna.
So Rabbi, I'm sorry. Go back a second though. The 4 poles in the parking lot.
Yes.
Caught my attention. So there's no, I mean, does anybody say that you don't need walls?
walls at all of the sukkah.
Right. Nobody says that, right?
Well, we're going to see why the poles work. Even if I were to suspend schach in middle of the air somehow magically, with guarding levios.
Right, because we kind of imagine that the poles are extending up, but because it's extending from the existing walls. But if there are no walls at all to extend from, are we just like imagining that the poles extend horizontally to create walls?
Good. So Toby asked a very important question. The Gemara will indeed address your very question in a few lines, but just to quickly satisfy your curiosity.
I can wait. It's all right.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay. Well, but Toby asked a very important question that the Gemara delays, but really it's worthwhile knowing, which is what is going on? Like, why would 4 poles work when we need walls? What's going on here? The Gemara will address it very soon. But let's just finish up Rav Huna. Amar lech Rav Huna. Rav Huna now is going to scratch his original opinion, and he's actually going to align with one of the, it's seemingly aligned with one of the suggestions in how to understand Rav Nachman. Amar lech Rav Huna, Pligi ve'emtza hagag. Indeed, the machlokus is in the middle of the roof when you put it in the middle of the roof. V'hu adin al sras hagag. And they also argue when you put it on the side of the roof. So here's the question then. Why would the Brisa specify that they argue in middle of the roof and not also specify that they argue when you put it aligned with the walls on the side of the roof? So that which we're told that they argue in middle on a case when the poles are put randomly in middle of the roof, it's we're teaching it's a bigger chiddush. It's a bigger novelty, something I would not have thought, right? Think about it. It's a much bigger chiddush to say that 4 poles in middle of the wall, not aligned with the wall, Rav Yaakov would say is kosher. So that's why we teach that case specifically. Not to say that the Chachamim agree with him when the poles are put on the side of the wall, but the reason we emphasize the case of the poles in the middle of the wall, even though they argue in both instances, is because we generally say koach de'atera adif. We want to emphasize when there's a really good kula. I remember when I took Hilchos Nida with Rav Ezra Schwartz in YU, he would always just say, guys, you want to know like a really good modern Orthodox kula. You just like throw out these like good kulas. So anyway, that's what the Gemara is doing.
And Moshe, what's bothering Toby has been bothering me all along. Because we learned in the beginning that a sukkah has to have 3 walls. Now, when we come to extending the walls of a building has a roof. And in my conception, a roof is the top of the walls. The walls don't extend above the roof. Because that's where the building ends, at the roof.
I am so glad that you were bothered by this question as well. And to be honest, if you guys weren't bothered by this, that's what would concern me. Because
we're lawyers,
It seems to contravene everything we know about how sukkahs work, right?
Right.
Good. With that, we're going to learn a brisa that's going to help us begin to understand this.
So how come it's only a brisa?
Yeah. Tell about it. Needs arba kundisim ba'arz sicha gaban. So again, you take 4 poles and you stick them randomly into the ground. Rav Yaakov Omer, what is going on? Why does Rav Yaakov say it's kosher? Here's what's going on. Rowan, there's no pictures in the Gemara. I'll show you a picture in a moment. Rowan kol yichlaku. We view each pole as if it's chiseled out and spread out. The yesh ben tevach lekan utevach lekan, and idon mishum tiyuman. So let me explain what's going on over here. So each pole, right? Let's say each pole is 1 by 1 tefach, right? So if you were to, in theory, chisel out part of it, you would wind up with an L shape, okay? Now there is a case in Hilchos Shabbos in Eruvin. Okay, remember how we keep coming back to the laws of Eruvin and not Eruvin per se, the laws of carrying of Hotzah and Shabbos, how there's the same analogous principles. So the issue was is that people wanted to draw water on Shabbos, but the water in the well is in Rosh Hashanah, and the well is in middle of a Rosh Hashanah. It's in a public domain. So how could I ever take water out of the well on Shabbos if I'm violating the Isser Votzav, transferring from private to public domain? So what they said was, you can do it, it's what's called Pasei B'Raos. They came up with this idea that you can enclose a space with 4 poles made in an L shape. You look all the way here, this is it. Can you see there's a well in the middle? I don't know if the lighting is so good, but hopefully you can make out that there's 4 L-shaped poles of wood that make up corners that surround the well. Okay. So this principle, Rav Yaakov says, would not just operate in the laws of Hotzah and Shabbos, but also would operate when we're trying to make an enclosed area for a sukkah. And this is called diyuma. Rashi says, dio amudin, 2 amudin. We view it as if 2, even though it's not chiseled out right now, if it has the right dimensions, we view it as if it's already chiseled out. Okay, now you're all saying, well, wait a minute. I thought the shear of a sukkah is 2 full walls, and the third one's a tefach, right? Well, that's because you know how we paskin. We paskin like the chachamim. The chachamim omrim, achu shtayim kil chasan ushlishis afilu tefach. This Toby Zaidi is what you're waiting for. The chachamim say this is bogus. A sukkah needs to be 2 walls, and the third one could be a tefach. But Rabbi Yaakov, you're taking this one tefach idea and you're running with it. You're saying, oh, if you have 4 poles that are a tefach, then you can make an enclosed area with it. That's not going to fly for a sukkah. And so that's basically the machlokas. So you guys are correct. We don't paskin like Rabbi Yaakov. We paskin like the chachamim, who say you need 2 walls and a tefach. And don't worry, in later Gemaras, we're going to get into the configuration of what do we mean when we say 2 walls and a tefach? Where's that tefach supposed to be placed? So that will come up on Vav Amud Beis and Zayin Amud Aleph, 6b and 7a. So in a few weeks we'll get there, God willing.
And I have another thing that was bothering me. We resolved it, but the analysis, let's put the parallel that was attempted to be drawn to an Erev bothers me, because an Erev is a restriction created by the rabbis, and then they created leniencies with respect to their restrictions. So they can create leniencies that permit you put poles and another board across the top and to create an imaginary wall. But here we're dealing with a basic halakhic requirement in the Torah.
Right. So the interesting thing is, is that discussion on a Doraisa or Durabanan level? In fact, over there it says, I believe that it needs to be an Amma by an Amma, not a Tefach by a Tefach. So the question is, why is there that discrepancy? If it's from a Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabban, that's an Isser Doraisa. That's actually biblical. If it's from a Rishus HaYachid to a Carmelis to a only rabbinically or rabbinically recognized public domain, then it's only rabbinically forbidden. So what you're saying is, hey mamru ve'hei mamru, the same rabbis who created the problem can give us a way to solve the problem.
Yes.
Right. So Tosfos and some of the Parshin deal with this. To what degree it's analogous? Why is it a little bit more machmer for Shabbos? Here we're seeing seemingly the sukkah is operating on a Doraisa level. So maybe that's why ultimately we can't use the same mechanisms. Quite possibly. I think that makes sense. Okay.
Well, it seems like it's more lenient with the sukkah, right?
In what way? Oh, yeah. Because the
right, which kind of makes sense, because you have to sit in the sukkah. You don't have to go out of the Eruv.
Right, it has to be a dwelling place. So this gets back to the same argument for why good asik should work. Because like Rabbi said, but ina michitzos nikaros. It's not enough just for there to be conceptual walls. There needs to be actual physical walls. So that you know that I mean, it's funny actually because I'm sure there's some work that's done on this. Rava said that the Hechsher Sukkah is that it's a Diras Arai versus Diras Keva, but maybe he also holds that you have to still have some awareness that you're inside a Sukkah. He doesn't necessarily reject that idea, maybe. Okay.
Well, yeah, because you want to make the rabbis want to make it easier with Sukkah because we are required to do it. So in a way, you want to make it easier for people to do what they have to do, as opposed to do what they don't have to do.
It's almost the other side of the svar that's given, but I think by Toaster Rabbeinu Peretz is that the svar that's given is that generally we'll find that since people are like, oh, it says in the Torah to do X, so I'll do X, but where do these rabbis come up with these rules? So sometimes the rabbis will even make stricter parameters around keeping mitzvahs midrabanan because they know people are less likely to be interested in keeping it. So they'll actually make it counterintuitively, right? You would think, oh, we should be more careful about biblical mandates. But since people tend to care more about what says in Torah, rightfully so, than what's being mandated later, therefore they actually made tougher parameters and standards for mitzvahs midrabanan. So that might account for why it's an amma by nam instead of a tefach by tefach. All right, we've been doing a lot of halacha and a lot of cheshbonos. Why don't we end off with a nice agadata? Okay, so something nice and sweet to end off. Where do we get this idea that 10 tefachim is the shear? That a 10 tefachim is the minimum height for a wall in a halacha and for sukkah as well, of course. So, Minolan, Itmar Rav, Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Chaviva, Masnu, and we're going to say, Moed Koloki, Hai Tzuga, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yonasan. All these rabbis taught as follows, and some people switch around the names. What did they teach? The Ara. It's funny for Thursday morning, folks, as it shows a picture of an Aron, of the ark in the book here. Now, whenever I see an ark, I just think of those falcons in Ramses battle camp. So, okay. So, Aron Tisha, Ukaporas Tepa. The Aron was 9 tefachim because it says it's an amma v'chetzi. It's an amma and a half. And amma is 4 tefachim. Amma is 4 tefachim. Oh, wait, I messed this up. Amma is 4 tefachim plus a half. No, wait. 6 tefachim. 6 tefachim, my mistake. Amma is 6 tefachim. And half an amma is 3 tefachim. So an amma v'chetzi, an amma and a half is 9 ammas. So the Aron was 9, tefach. The Aron was 9 tefachim tall. See, I'm already, this isn't even the real math Gemara over here, and it's already hitting me. So the Aron was 9 tefachim tall. And then plus the kaporas, the covering that was on top of it, that equals 10 tefachim. Harei kan asara. Uchsiv v'na'ardi l'chasham v'dibarti t'chamei al hakaporas. And God says, my shechina, my presence, will hover down and dwell upon the kaporas, the top of the Aron. Utanya, don't ask me what this means. Rabbi Yossi Omer, me'olam lo yarda shechina lamata, lo alu Moshe v'Eliyah lamara. In truth, God never goes completely down to earth, and Moshe and Eliyahu, when each of them ascended to heaven in their own narratives, they didn't truly ascend all the way to heaven. When Moshe went to get the Torah, and Eliyahu goes up in the storm, Shenemar, Hashemayim Shemayim Hashem, V'aretz Yisam Le'adam. The heavens are to God, and earth was given to man. I think people were telling me back when, in the, it was 1969 when we first got to the moon? Was that it? 1969? So people told me that back then, before it actually happened, there were rabbis who were saying, no, it's never going to happen. Hashemayim Shemayim Hashem, V'aretz Yisam Le'adam. Heaven is God's. We're supposed to be down here. Man's not meant to go up to the sky. And then we got airplanes, and then we got space travel. So you can understand this in a metaphorical or metaphysical sense. If you want to make sense of things, that's how you have to understand references to heaven in general in these matters. And the Shekhinah did not descend below. Is that true? So basically, we're going to go through a series of instances in which it would seem that either God comes all the way down to earth or man goes all the way up to God. And then we're just going to reject each and every one by simply dismissing it and saying, well, he came up to the 10 tefach mark. That's going to be what everything is. Here we go. So you're the Shekhinah Mata, the Shekhinah not descend below 10 tefachim, but Vayir Hashem al Har Sinai. What? God descended to Har Sinai. So the answer is Lamame Sar Tefachim. He hovered above 10 tefachim. Doesn't imply again that God is going to come down to the Mount of Olives in the end of days. The answer is Lamame Sar Tefachim. He will come up until the 10 tefach mark. Did Moshe and Eliyahu truly not ascend to heaven? Moshe ascended to God. He didn't quite get up. He only got up to the 10 tefach mark. Didn't Eliyahu go up to heaven as well? So below 10 tefachim. So that he instructs Moshe to hold on to the throne as he spreads his cloud of glory over Moshe.
Following this.
Melamed shepires shakai miziv shchinaso vanano alav. So we see that God spreads some of his divine presence and aura and cloud onto Moshe. This is some of the story when Moshe goes up to heaven. The angels do not want him to take the Torah down to man, and he's afraid of being harmed. So God says, hold on to my throne of glory, and I'll protect you. So the answer is, wait, so it sounds like he went all the way up to heaven. He had to touch the throne of glory. Lamatame Sarah. He only went up to the 10th tefach mark. But it says that he held on to God's throne of glory. How do you get to the throne of glory without going all the way up to heaven? So I don't know what this means. God lowered the throne down to the 10th tefach mark, and Moshe lifted his hand up. So that way, neither truly went over the 10th tefach mark. And I'm sure, I didn't see this, but I'm sure there's some, for sure in the Achronim, where like in the Talmud, like, but wait, like what if he's like within the 10th tefach mark, or how did he, how are you mitzam saying that? I'm sure there's a whole discussion. Now, I tried looking at the Marsha. The Marsha didn't have anything explicit on this. He references us to other Masechtas, but I didn't have a chance to look at it. But this is a really odd Gemara. There's clearly some greater theological meaning to it than just the matter of measurement. So one nice thing that I found from Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, two ha'aros I'll share with you. One is he notes, interestingly, that while God cannot come completely down to earth and man cannot go completely to heaven, angels, interestingly, are able to traverse both heaven and earth completely. They're able to go all the way up to heaven and all the way to earth. And interestingly, I don't know this so well, but when you study Ralbag and similar theologians, and they have their whole conception of astronomy or astrology, whatever they were doing back then, so they too kind of built up this whole system which God does not completely enter into our world, but the angels are how he operates and how he affects the lower worlds. So it does fit with the theological system. But I'll read to you Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach's question. At the end of the day, what the heck does this have to do with a sukkah being 10 tefachim tall? The fact, okay, let's just buy into it for a moment. God cannot descend 10 tefachim all the way down to earth. Why should that have any bearing on the fact that a sukkah's height should be a minimum of 10 tefachim? Right? It's like we say, Ma'ayin Shmita Eitzel Sinai. What does one have to do with the other? So he says, and I think Rabbi Cohen would like this one, right? One of Rabbi Cohen's catchphrases is bringing heaven down to earth, or right, combining heaven or something like that. So that's one of Rabbi Cohen's catchphrases. So I have to show this to him because I think he'll enjoy this piece for Sukkot. Benira dechemen she'eschach hu kadosh. We're going to learn later on Testament Aleph that the schach that we use for our sukkah becomes holy. It becomes sacred. We designate it, becomes huksa liyantim. So mechal sukkahs tasalach shechal shem shamayim al sukkah. The schach of a sukkah is imbued with a sacred status. V'zeki'ilu merames shanachnu in some samach l'shchina. And this, user, please hit mute. Thank you. And this is merames to us that v'zeki'ilu merames shanachnu nimsayim samach l'shchina shechopepes aleinu. And so we're supposed to envision ourselves that the divine presence is hovering right over us. And that's why the Sukkah is 10 tefachim, because since God's presence comes down to the 10 tefach mark, and when we have the schach above us, we're supposed to be envisioning as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself is hovering right over us. And that's the connection specifically of why we're learning from HaKadosh Baruch Hu coming down to 10 tefachim, that a Sukkah is meant to be 10 tefachim, because it's like the Shekhinah residing over us when we enter our Sukkahs and protecting us and enveloping us, which of course fits with the broader theme of what the Sukkah is meant to represent. Okay, and with that, Rabosai, that concludes not only Dalam Abayz, but we just got, we just went almost halfway down Peyam and Aleph. So when I see you, God willing, next Monday at 8:15 as well, it looks like we already got a lot of the Gemara done already. With that, I want to wish you all a Chag Kosher V'Sameach, and hopefully I look forward to seeing most of you over Yontif if you're here. All right.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you very
Have a
much.
good night, everyone.
Good
You
night,
too.
everyone.